Buffalo wings. Buffalo wings were invented on October 30th, 1964 at the Anchor Bar in Buffalo, New York by Teresa Bellissimo, who fried leftover chicken wings and tossed them in hot sauce and butter as a late-night snack for her son and his friends. Wings were previously considered a throwaway cut, used only for stock. Nobody had ever served them as a main event. Teresa turned them into the most ordered bar food in America. Super Bowl Sunday alone drives consumption of over 1.4 billion wings in the United States. A single day. One accidental late-night stack created an industry worth billions and a Super Bowl tradition that shows no signs of ending. Chicken fried steak. Chicken fried steak contains no chicken. It is a beef steak, typically a tenderized round steak, breaded and fried exactly like fried chicken, which is where the name comes from. The technique arrived in Texas with German and Austrian immigrants in the 19th century who applied their schnitzel method to beef, because beef was what Texas had in abundance. Texas adopted it so completely that chicken fried steak became the unofficial state dish, served at every diner with white gravy and mashed potatoes. A German immigrant's pork technique applied to Texas beef produced a dish so Texan that Germany has never received any credit for it. Red velvet cake. Red velvet cake was invented in the American South in the early 20th century when natural cocoa reacted with acidic buttermilk to produce a reddish tint in the batter. The color was subtle and chemical rather than dramatic. When commercial red food dye became widely available in the 1940s, bakers began amplifying the color until the cake became the vivid red associated with it today. The Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York claims to have served it first and allegedly charged guests for the recipe. A woman from Canada reportedly made the recipe public out of spite after receiving the bill. Red velvet became a Southern institution through a hotel, a Canadian, and an act of revenge. Mac and cheese. Macaroni and cheese is the most consumed comfort food in the United States, and its origin is disputed between Thomas Jefferson and an enslaved cook named James Hemings, who traveled with Jefferson to France and learned French pasta techniques. Jefferson brought a pasta machine back from Europe and served macaroni and cheese at a White House dinner in 1802. Kraft introduced the boxed version in 1937 during the Great Depression and sold 8 million boxes in the first year. Americans now buy over 1 million boxes of Kraft mac and cheese every single day. A dish served at the White House in 1802 became a Depression-era survival food that turned into the most purchased boxed product in American grocery history. French fries. French fries are not French. They were invented in Belgium in the late 1600s when villagers along the Meuse River began frying small fish. When the river froze in winter and fish became unavailable, they cut potatoes into fish shapes and fried those instead. American soldiers stationed in Belgium during World War I encountered them, assumed they were French because the Belgian army spoke French, and brought the name home. Belgium has been correcting this mistake for over a century. Nobody is listening. McDonald's now sells more French fries every day than Belgium produces potatoes in a week. Austin smoked brisket. Texas barbecue is not barbecue sauce. It is salt, pepper, post-oak smoke, and thyme. Franklin Barbecue in Austin charges no more than any other barbecue restaurant and has a line that starts forming at 6 a.m. for an 11 a.m. opening. People wait 4 hours. Anthony Bourdain called it the best barbecue in the world and flew to Austin specifically to say so. The black bark on the exterior is not burnt. It is the smoke ring and rendered fat that formed over 12 to 18 hours of cooking. Cutting into a properly smoked brisket and seeing the pink center is the entire point of Texas. Deep dish pizza. Chicago deep dish pizza was invented at Pizzeria Uno in Chicago in 1943 by Ike Sewell, who wanted to create a pizza substantial enough to constitute a full meal rather than a snack. The crust is pressed up the sides of a deep pan. The toppings are layered in reverse order with cheese on the bottom and crushed tomatoes on top to prevent the cheese from burning during the long baking time. New York considers Chicago deep dish a casserole rather than pizza. Chicago considers New York pizza a cracker with toppings. This argument has been ongoing since 1943 and has generated more passionate online debate than most political issues. Both cities are completely sincere and neither is entirely wrong. Sloppy Joe. Nobody agrees on where the Sloppy Joe came from. One story credits a cook named Joe in a Sioux City, Iowa diner in the 1930s who added tomato sauce to loose meat sandwiches and refused to be neat about it. Another traces it to Sloppy Joe's bar in Havana, where Ernest Hemingway drank and a similar sandwich was served. Both stories are probably partially true and mostly mythology. What is certain is that ground beef and tomato sauce on a soft bun became a fixture of American school cafeterias, church potlucks, and home cooking because the ingredients are cheap and the preparation is forgiving. You cannot really overcook a sloppy Joe. The sloppiness is structural. Pancakes. Pancakes are one of the oldest foods in human history, with evidence of flat grain cakes cooked on hot stones going back over 30,000 years. The American version, thick and fluffy, uses baking powder to create the rise. In 1889, Aunt Jemima became the first ready-mix pancake product ever sold, completely changing how Americans cooked breakfast at home. The world record for the most pancakes eaten in one sitting is 113. Southern fried chicken. Southern fried chicken emerged from two separate culinary traditions that combined in the American South during the 18th and 19th centuries. Scottish immigrants brought the technique of frying chicken in fat, while West African enslaved people contributed the practice of heavily seasoning and marinating the meat before cooking. Neither tradition alone produced the dish. The combination of Scottish frying method and African spicing created what became the foundation for nearly every fried chicken style that followed. The chicken is coated in seasoned flour and fried in a cast iron pan or deep fryer until the crust sets hard and golden. It became central to Southern family culture and Sunday meals throughout the 19th century and remains the base from which Korean, Japanese, and Nashville styles all developed. Doner kebab. The doner kebab, as the world knows it, was invented in Berlin in 1972 by a Turkish immigrant named Kadir Nurman. He served rotating spit meat inside flatbread for workers who needed to eat while walking. Germany did not invent the concept. Germany perfected the format. Today, Germany sells around 400 million doner kebabs per year. That is more than McDonald's sells in Germany. A Turkish immigrant's street food idea now outsells the most powerful fast food corporation on earth in the country where it was invented. New York cheesecake. New York cheesecake was invented by accident. In 1872, a New York dairy farmer trying to replicate French Neufchâtel cheese over-enriched his mixture with cream and produced something denser and richer than anything Europe had made. By the 1900s, Jewish delis on the Lower East Side were serving thick slices on every counter in the city. The formula never changed: cream cheese, eggs, sugar, vanilla, and a graham cracker base. No water bath, no gelatin, no shortcuts. Every lighter cheesecake made anywhere in the world exists in apology for not being this one. S'mores pie. S'mores were invented by the Girl Scouts of America. The first published recipe appeared in a 1927 Girl Scout handbook under the name Some Mores, implying the obvious outcome of eating one. The combination of graham cracker, chocolate, and toasted marshmallow became so associated with American campfire culture that it now appears in pie format, ice cream, cereal, coffee drinks, and breakfast bars. The s'mores pie with a graham cracker crust, chocolate ganache filling, and torched marshmallow topping is a campfire dessert converted into a restaurant dish that requires a kitchen blowtorch to finish. The blowtorch is necessary. Nobody who has eaten a properly torched marshmallow topping has ever suggested removing it. Bacon and eggs. Bacon and eggs became the defining American breakfast in the 1920s, largely because of a marketing campaign. Sigmund Freud's nephew Edward Bernays was hired by a bacon company to convince Americans that a hearty breakfast was healthier than a light one. He surveyed doctors, got them to recommend bacon and eggs, and published the results in newspapers nationwide. Within years, bacon and eggs had become the standard American morning meal and has remained there ever since. Bagel with cream cheese. The bagel originated in Jewish communities in Poland in the 17th century and was brought to New York by Eastern European Jewish immigrants in the late 1800s. The defining characteristic of a real bagel is that it is boiled before baking, which creates the chewy, dense interior and shiny crust. New York bagel makers claim their bagels taste different because of the minerals in New York City tap water. Cream cheese was invented in New York in 1872 by a dairyman named William Lawrence, making the combination entirely a New York creation. Philly cheesesteak. The Philly cheesesteak was invented in 1930 by Pat Olivieri, a hot dog vendor in South Philadelphia who threw beef scraps on his grill one afternoon and put them in a bread roll. A cab driver smelled it, asked for one, and told him to sell that instead. Pat did. The cheese came later. The correct cheese is Cheese Whiz, not provolone, not American. Locals will tell you this immediately and with conviction. The roll must be from Amorosa's Bakery. The beef must be shaved thin. Every cheesesteak sold outside Philadelphia is an approximation. Some are good, none are correct. Twice-baked potato. The twice-baked potato requires baking a potato, scooping out the flesh, mixing it with butter, cheese, and sour cream, stuffing it back into the skin, and baking it again. The process doubles the cooking time and triples the calorie count. It became a staple of American dinner parties in the 1950s and 1960s, when elaborate side dishes were considered a sign of good hosting. The twice-baked potato requires significantly more effort than its appearance suggests, which is precisely why serving it communicated something about the cook. Today, it appears on steakhouse menus across America, priced at a level that makes the effort economically rational. Boston clam chowder in bread bowl. New England clam chowder has been a Boston staple since the 1700s, when fishermen simmered their daily catch with salt pork, onions, and cream in large communal pots. The bread bowl format, sourdough hollowed out and filled with chowder, was popularized at Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco before Boston adopted it as their own. In 1939, a Maine legislator introduced a bill making it illegal to add tomatoes to clam chowder anywhere in Maine. The bill failed. The sentiment never left. Manhattan's tomato-based version still causes visible discomfort in New England whenever the subject comes up. Maine lobster roll. Lobster rolls were invented in 1929 at Perry's Restaurant in Milford, Connecticut, not Maine. Maine took the concept, perfected it, and now owns it culturally to the point where the origin story is rarely mentioned. The Maine version is cold lobster meat briefly dressed in mayonnaise, served in a split-top hot dog bun toasted in butter. The Connecticut version is warm lobster in melted butter. Both states consider the other version a mistake. Maine produces over 100 million pounds of lobster annually. The same crustacean that colonial servants complained about eating too often now sells for $40 a roll on the harbor. Banoffee pie. Banoffee pie was invented in 1972 at the Hungry Monk restaurant in East Sussex, England, by chef Nigel Mackenzie and Ian Dowding. The name combines banana and toffee. The toffee layer is made by boiling an unopened can of condensed milk for 3 hours until the sugar caramelizes inside the can. Home cooks who attempt this without supervision occasionally experience the can exploding. The Hungry Monk kept the recipe secret for years before publishing it in a cookbook. By then, it had already spread across Britain and eventually globally. A British pub dessert invented by accident has become one of the most replicated no-bake pies in the world. The exploding can warning appears in every serious recipe. Avocado toast. Avocado toast became a global phenomenon in the 2010s, driven almost entirely by social media and cafe culture. The dish existed long before its viral moment. Australian cafes were serving it in the 1990s, but Instagram turned it into a cultural symbol. In 2017, an Australian millionaire sparked international controversy by suggesting that young people could afford to buy homes if they stopped spending money on avocado toast. Avocado prices spiked globally as demand surged, and Mexican avocado farmers saw their incomes triple within a decade. Shawarma. Shawarma comes from the Turkish word çevirme, meaning turning. Meat stacked on a vertical rotating spit, slow roasted for hours, shaved continuously as it cooks. The technique originated in the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century and spread across 3 continents. In 2012, the film The Avengers ended with Tony Stark suggesting shawarma. Global shawarma restaurant sales spiked within days of the film's release. A superhero movie did more for shawarma awareness than a century of Middle Eastern immigration. Marvel accidentally became the most effective shawarma marketing campaign in history. Eggs Benedict.
Eggs Benedict was created in New York City in the 1890s. The most common story credits a Wall Street broker named Lemuel Benedict, who ordered buttered toast, bacon, poached eggs, and hollandaise sauce at the Waldorf Hotel after a night of heavy drinking. The maitre d' liked it so much he put it on the menu. Hollandaise, the rich butter and egg yolk sauce poured over the top, is one of the 5 classic French mother sauces and one of the most difficult to make without it breaking.
Stuffed bell pepper. Stuffed peppers appear in almost every cuisine that has access to both peppers and ground meat. The American version, a bell pepper filled with ground beef, rice, and tomato sauce, became a mid-century home cooking staple because it solved the weekly question of how to make ground beef feel like a complete, considered meal. The pepper acts as edible cookware. It holds the filling, adds sweetness as it roasts, and means no extra dish to wash. Home economics teachers across the United States used stuffed peppers as the canonical lesson in how to build a balanced meal in a single vessel. It is still one of the most pinned dinner recipes on every food platform every autumn, reliably without exception. Hash browns. Hash browns were invented in the northeastern United States in the late 1800s as a way to use leftover boiled potatoes. The name comes from the French word hacher, meaning to chop. McDonald's introduced its hash brown patty in 1977, and it became one of the most recognized fast food items in the world. In Britain, a similar dish called bubble and squeak uses leftover cabbage and potato fried together. Switzerland has rosti, South Korea has gochujang. Every culture that discovered the potato eventually figured out that frying leftover potato pieces was one of the best ideas available. Peach cobbler pie. Peach cobbler is the dessert of the American South, and the argument about whether it should have a bottom crust, a top crust, both, or a biscuit dropped on top has divided Southern families for generations. The dish originated in the American South when early settlers adapted British baked puddings using whatever fruit was available and whatever dough could be assembled quickly. Georgia produces more peaches commercially than any other state and considers peach cobbler a cultural birthright. The peach cobbler pie format, with a pastry crust beneath a cobbler filling, is a compromise between two traditions that satisfies neither side completely and pleases everyone eating it regardless. Miami Cubano sandwich. The Cuban sandwich was not invented in Cuba. It was invented in the cigar factories of Tampa and Key West in the 1880s by Cuban workers who needed a filling portable lunch. Miami adopted it, pressed it flatter, and made it famous globally. The construction is specific: Cuban bread, roasted pork, ham, Swiss cheese, yellow mustard, and pickles. No mayo, no lettuce, no tomato. The sandwich is pressed in a plancha until the bread is crisp and the cheese is completely melted into the meat. Tampa adds salami. Miami considers this an error. The argument is ongoing and will not be resolved. Caesar wrap. The Caesar salad was invented in Tijuana, Mexico in 1924 by an Italian immigrant named Caesar Cardini, who ran out of ingredients during a busy 4th of July weekend and threw together whatever was left: romaine lettuce, parmesan, croutons, and a dressing made from egg, lemon, and Worcestershire sauce. The wrap version appeared in American offices and fast casual restaurants in the 1990s, when tortillas replaced bread as the default lunch format. The Caesar wrap is now the most ordered wrap at corporate lunch catering across the United States. A desperate improvisation in a Mexican kitchen became the defining office lunch of America. Classic meatloaf. Every American family has a meatloaf recipe. No two are identical. Ground beef, breadcrumbs, egg, and whatever the family adds. Worcestershire, bell pepper, ketchup on top, brown sugar, a layer of bacon. The dish became standardized during the Great Depression when stretching meat with fillers was not a choice but a necessity. Home economists published meatloaf recipes in government pamphlets to teach families how to feed more people with less beef. The ketchup glaze on top became nearly universal because it was cheap, sweet, and caramelized beautifully in a home oven. Depression-era survival food became one of the most searched comfort meal recipes in the English-speaking world every single winter. Hard-shell taco. The hard-shell taco that Americans and Australians eat was not invented in Mexico. It was invented by Glenn Bell, who founded Taco Bell in 1962 after studying how a San Bernardino Mexican restaurant pre-fried taco shells to speed up service. Traditional Mexican tacos use soft corn tortillas. The crispy shell version was a fast food engineering decision. Mexico received the hard shell back as an American export decades later. The ground beef taco with shredded cheese, sour cream, and iceberg lettuce is now so globally recognized that it is the default image when most people picture Mexican food, despite being a California fast food invention. The original is still better. Most people have never tried it. Classic cherry pie. Cherry pie is so American that the phrase American as apple pie is factually incorrect. Cherry pie predates apple pie in American culinary history and was considered the more patriotic dessert until apple pie marketing campaigns in the 20th century reversed the association. George Washington's famous cherry tree story, almost certainly invented by biographer Mason Locke Weems in 1806, created a cultural connection between Washington, cherries, and American honesty that influenced dessert preferences for generations. Washington almost certainly never said he could not tell a lie about a cherry tree. The cherry pie on American Thanksgiving tables is older than the myth that inspired it.